All right, I want to look at an article that was written by a very well-known writer named Matt Taibbi, who writes for Rolling Stone. And this guy is very respected, and I want to break down sort of the mechanics that this guy has used to show what it is he's actually doing. Because when you look at it, he's not offering any facts and he's not offering any arguments. It is just a bunch of sophistry. And so before we get started, I want to look at our list of fallacies here and just get a couple of ideas out there. And the main one I'm going to focus on here is the red herring fallacies. A red herring fallacy, one of the main subtypes of fallacies of relevance, is an error in logic where a proposition is, or is intended to be, misleading in order to make irrelevant or false inferences. In the general case, any logical inference based on fake arguments intended to replace the lack of real arguments or to replace implicitly the subject of discussion. So a red herring, a speaker attempts to distract an audience by deviating from the topic at hand by introducing a separate argument the speaker believes is easier to speak to. Argument given in response to another argument, which is irrelevant, and draws attention away from the subject of argument. Ad hominem here is used a lot. I'll highlight that one, which is just attacking the arguer instead of the argument. There's the abusive fallacy, verbally abusing the opponent rather than arguing about the originally proposed argument. There's an appeal to motive, dismissing an idea by questioning the motives. Tone policing, focusing on emotion behind a message rather than the message itself as a discrediting tactic. There's some appeal to authority, and there's a great deal of appeal to emotion. An argument is made due to the manipulation of emotions rather than the use of valid reasoning. So what is this very well-established writer? What does he tell us about Donald Trump? Let's look at his article, and we can break down, is there facts, is there evidence, is there argument, or is it sophistry? And then we can identify the particular mechanics and decide whether this person is somebody that you should listen to and take seriously. So, Matt Taibbi, insane clown president, Trump was right about the media. So, this is insane clown president. That's an allusion to insane clown posse. You're trying to compare the two. This is a way to lower Donald Trump's social standing. He's like this kind of silly semi-rap group that dresses up like a bunch of clowns and just says ridiculous things. But he was right about the media. So self-flagellation a little bit. Well, let's go a little deeper and see what this technique really is here. President Trump, how America got it so wrong. So immediately we're primed to think voting for Donald Trump was the wrong thing. Let's find out why. Journalists and politicians blew off the warning signs of a Trump presidency. Now we all must pay the price. Are we all paying the price? I mean, there's a lot of us that liked the policies. Donald Trump enters the White House as a lone wrecking ball of conspiratorial ideas, a one-man movement unto himself who owes almost nothing to traditional Republicans. Okay, so look at the rhetoric at use here. A lone wrecking ball. I mean, this is a guy that sported half of the country voting for him. But this is purely just ad hominem. Are they attacking his positions? No, they're painting him as this figure that's out there so far on the fringe that he's actually all alone. It's not that 60-some million Americans voted for him. He's alone. So right here, we're starting the argument out with a lie. Conspiratorial ideas. So let's look at the definition of conspiracy. The act of conspiring together, a group of conspirators, an agreement among conspirators. The word conspiracy, all it means is a group of people in secret that have formed a conspiracy. It's an agreement. Well, does conspiratorial, does that mean false? Are conspiratorial ideas necessarily false? Because that's all that matters. Are the ideas true or not true? I don't care if they're conspiratorial or if they're mainstream. They're either true or they're untrue. Well, he doesn't say that, and so he's using this conspiratorial word. This is just a rhetorical device. It's actually not saying anything other than trying to paint an ominous picture. He's a one-man movement. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the guy got millions of votes. I don't think he's a one-man movement. And the fact that he's opposed to traditional Republicans, well, traditional Republicans got us into Iraq and Afghanistan, who almost the majority of Americans agree those wars were a mistake. So he opens his article, this brilliant journalist for Rolling Stones. He doesn't start with any facts. He doesn't start with any truth. He doesn't start with any information. It's just a collection of ad hominems. It's a collection of appeals to emotion. There's no logic here. There's no facts here. But let's cut him some slack. Maybe the article itself has something in it. So Tuesday, November 8th, outside Trump Tower, a man in telltale red "Make America Great Again" hat taps me on the shoulder. "You press?" he says, looking at a set of lanyards around my neck. I nod. "F yourself," he says, thrusting a middle finger in my face. Well, what is this? This is an appeal to emotion. This manipulates your emotion. There's no reasoning here. What he's doing is painting a picture of a Trump supporter being an ignorant, rude redneck. "F yourself," he says. He then turns around and walks a boy of about 5 away from me down 5th Avenue, a hand gently tousling his hair. So this is how he chooses to open this article. That Trump's all alone and his one supporter is an ignorant redneck who sadly is leading his beautiful young son astray. And the article goes on. This was before Donald Trump's historic victory. The message afterward, no doubt, would have been the same. Okay. There's no way to overstate the horror of what just went down. There's no way to overstate the horror of Donald Trump getting elected. Well, what does that mean? I'm sure that since this is one of the opening sentences of this paragraph, we're going to get this horror clarified. Sure, we've had some unstable characters in the White House. Maybe we have. JFK had health problems that led him to take amphetamine shots during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, so he opened with a Democrat. This is to kind of present the illusion of being impartial. Reagan's attention span was so short the CIA had to make mini-movies to brief him on foreign leaders. Okay. George W. Bush not only didn't read the news, he wasn't interested in it. What's in the newspapers worth worrying about? He once asked, without irony. Well, do you know it was without irony? Were you there? Or are you just mischaracterizing it? And what does George W. Bush, what does JFK, and what do Reagan have to do with Donald Trump? All he did was slander other presidents, but that has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Donald Trump isn't any of these guys. So what's in the newspapers worth worrying about, of course, is this kind of classic trope that George Bush and Republicans are just these low information people that don't read. This was a common attack on Sarah Palin. She just doesn't even read. Maybe she can't read. Why not offer an argument against their position rather than the ad hominem? So, but all of these men were just fronts for one or the other half of familiar alternating power structure, okay, surrounded by predictable, relatively sober, so Trump isn't sober even though he's never had a drink, relatively sober Confederates who managed the day-to-day. So they were just managing the day-to-day. It's not like JFK, it's not like George W. Bush had to deal with a crisis. 9/11 was just a day-to-day event. Okay, so this is what we're dealing with this writer. Trump enters the White House as a lone wrecking ball of conspiratorial ideas. Okay, you already said that. A lone wrecking ball. Like he's repeating his insults, and we're not even through the first page. A one-man movement unto himself who owes nothing to traditional Republicans. And here's how he ends this sentence. The sentence that started up here. This is what's so terrifying about Trump. He enters the White House as a lone wrecking ball of conspiratorial ideas, a one-man movement unto himself who owes almost nothing to traditional Republicans and can be expected to be anything but a figurehead. That's how he concludes his opening sentence. This is why Trump is terrifying. He can be expected to be anything. He's not going to be just a figurehead. He's actually going to do something. That's a negative? To who? It would be a good thing if he would be a figurehead and nothing else. What a bizarre case to make. He takes office at a time when the chief executive is vastly more powerful than ever before, with nearly unlimited authority to investigate, surveil, torture, and assassinate foreigners, and even U.S. citizens, powers that didn't seem to trouble people much when they were granted to Barack Obama. Well, they were powers that didn't bother the liberal elite when Obama claimed them. This is something that Republicans and more specifically conservatives have been worried about for 8 years or more, is the consolidation of this sort of power. But now you're saying he can assassinate foreigners and even U.S. citizens. Okay, this is more of just this appeal to emotion that we're in this scary place. Shunned, okay, that's a loaded word. Shunned during election season by many of his own party. So this is one of these appeal to authorities, as if you'll see this a lot when they say Fox News criticizes Trump or GOP senator criticizes Trump, as if it makes the argument more true or more or less true because his own party is opposed to him. And it's like, who cares where his own party stands? Is what he's saying true or is it false? All you get is this rhetoric, shunned by his own party. President-elect Trump's closest advisors are a collection of crackpots and dilettantes, there's your SAT adjective, who will make Bush's cabinet look like the Nobel Committee. So here we are 2 years into the Trump presidency. Is John Bolton a crackpot or dilettante? You may not like him, but he's been around forever. Is Rudy Giuliani a crackpot or a dilettante? The guy was mayor during the 2001 terrorist attacks on the two towers. He's one of the most respected politicians in all of American history, particularly recent history. But he's just a crackpot and dilettante. Like, why would you simply classify people that way? Like, you'd have to offer an example. Crackpot and dilettante, for example. And why use the word dilettante in the first place? This is a total... SAT word, amateurs and dabblers. This is meant to appeal to people that would, the family members that think that they could be on Jeopardy. And it makes them feel smart. But it's just a word. It's just a word to inflate your ego. Like, is Rudy Giuliani a dilettante? Chris Christie, is he a crackpot or a dilettante? You can disagree with these people, but why not deal with the argument instead of just, again, more ad hominems? This is not the quality of writing you would expect to see of a very erudite, well-spoken, intelligent writer for Rolling Stone who everyone should take with such gravity. There's no gravity here. This is just childhood insults mixed with your SAT study guide. So anyway, the head of his EPA transition team, Myron Abel, is a noted climate change denier. So the EPA, again, notice he used the word climate change, not global warming, because I made a video on how it was on the Ludic fallacy. After there has not been any global warming for 20 years, there was the fallacy of definitional retreat. They didn't change the argument, they didn't change the cause, they didn't change the solution. They just changed, they just changed the word from global warming to climate change because it's easier to make the case using these words. And denier, that has the Holocaust undertones. But notice this. Nowhere is policy criticized. Again, another ad hominem, another just insult. And this is a great one right here. Pyramid enthusiast and stabbing expert Ben Carson is already being mentioned as a possible Health and Human Services chief. Pyramid enthusiast, so this is playing off the conspiracy trope, I guess, but I mean, the pyramids are real. There's a lot of questions about the pyramids. Why is Ben Carson's interest in the pyramids even remotely relevant? Why not an Egyptology enthusiast? Why or his historical interest and stabbing expert? I mean, the guy's a brain surgeon. Why not say brain surgeon and serious presidential contender Ben Carson? He's a stabbing expert. I mean, this is pure rhetoric. And then again, it's just meant to distract rather than offer a case against anything Ben Carson advocated or any of his qualifications. One insult after another here. And here they go after Rudy Giuliani. Probably too unhinged. This is one of those words that I think is dreamed up by the social and behavioral psychologists that are working on behalf of the globalist agenda. I've never heard this word used in common speech until the past year or two. And it's one of these things that you're just meant, it kind of gets you to think past the sale. He's too unhinged. Well, what does that mean? What would Rudy Giuliani looking too unhinged by now for even a People's Court reboot? Like, that's a clever insult. But what would an unhinged Rudy Giuliani look like? I watch him on television and he appears very rational. Now, you can disagree with him. I have plenty of disagreements with Rudy Giuliani. But in no way would I call him unhinged. I would go after his arguments, which Matt Taibbi doesn't do. He resorts to just simple wordsmithing. This is just word magic right here. And then he's too unhinged for a People's Court reboot. Not even People's Court, but an actual reboot of People's Court. So he's not even good enough for the reboot, which is implied, going to a red herring fallacy. It's a lot of implied argument. There's no real case. The reboot's going to be worse than People's Court. And Rudy Giuliani isn't even fit for the reboot. Does he have evidence of this? Rudy Giuliani might make a great personality on People's Court. I mean, who knows? Anyway, he might be Attorney General. God only knows. Strong words from an atheist. God only knows who might end up being Supreme Court nominees. Well, Brett Kavanaugh, who's actually pretty middle of the road. We have an answer to that question now. We can only hope they turn out to be lawyers, or at least people who played lawyers on TV. So this is another jab rather than making an argument on who maybe he should nominate, who he shouldn't nominate. Trump's just so blind to reality. He's just gonna go with whatever he saw on TV. Maybe he'll appoint a television lawyer to the Supreme Court. That's where we are. Well, not really. You can disagree with Brett Kavanaugh's politics, but he was a qualified judge. And sitting behind this funhouse nightmare of executive branch worthies. Wow, that is a lot of words. Funhouse, so this is a bunch of kids on Halloween being silly, but it's a nightmare. Okay, so this paints Pennywise or something, some crazy clown of executive branch. Worthies is a very interesting phrase too. When's the last time you ever heard anyone talk about someone being a worthies? So again, pure ad hominem, no argument, no criticism of policy, just a bunch of strung together, high octane SAT words, which Politico, okay, because they're obviously unbiased, which Politico speculates will be one of the more eclectic cabinets ever. Now, this is an appeal to emotion, obviously, but what is it I'm exactly supposed to feel? Eclectic, varied, wide-ranging, extensive, diverse, assorted, free. So this is going to be one of the more diverse cabinets. Isn't that what the left wants? We're going to have a very diverse cabinet under Donald Trump. Isn't that good? Well, according to the tone of this article, no, because he's just using words to make himself sound intelligent. So I want you to keep in mind, using a thesaurus to say, to make a bunch of emotional points doesn't make a person a good writer. So let's see, we'll be a rubber stamping all Republican legislature that will attract the loving admiration of tin horn despots ranging from Minsk to Beijing. So a rubber stamping. So it's just like nothing is going to be reviewed. It's just going to be signed off without even reading it. Oh, kind of like Obamacare, maybe. An all-Republican legislature, thank God, that will attract the loving admiration of. So again, no criticism of the policy of this all-Republican legislator. It's just saying it will be admired by, and here's the ad hominem, tin horn despots from Minsk to Beijing. There's not an argument here. And tin horn is just another one of these words that's designed to sound ominous. This whole thing is just designed to paint an ominous picture. I don't know if we've had a fact yet. Oh, here we go. Trump made idiots of us all. Well, he made idiots of you. From the end of the primary season onward, I felt sure Trump was en route. Why do you have to use that? Yeah, it makes you sound a little smarter, right? En route to ruining, perhaps forever, the Republican Party. Okay, this is the ultimate in concern trolling. When a Democrat says, they're going to ruin the Republican Party. Yeah, I'm sure you lost sleep over that. Okay, as a force in modern American life, now the Republicans are more dominant than ever, and it is the Democratic Party that is shattered and faces an uncertain future. That is also, that's our first fact. That may be one of our first paragraphs with any facts in it, and we're halfway through the article. And he says, and they deserve it. Well, let's find out why. The Democratic Party's failure to keep Donald Trump out of the White House in 2016 will go down as one of the all-time examples of insular arrogance. The party not only spent most of the past 2 years ignoring the warning signs of the Trump rebellion, but vilifying anyone who tried to point them out. It denounced all rumors of creeping unpopularity as vulgar lies and bullied anyone who dared question its campaign strategy. The Democrats did indeed call people liars and bullied anyone who was pro-Trump. And it did so by calling them racist, sexist, and agents of Vladimir Putin. So that's interesting. Right here, Matt Taibbi admits that Democrats spuriously called people that supported Trump's agenda or even said Trump had a chance at winning. They called them racist, they called them sexist, they called them Russian bots or whatever, without evidence. They called them racist, but it was untrue. That's an interesting admission to make that I think people probably miss. That means these words are just being thrown around for political expediency. So, going on here, but the party's willful blindness symbolized a similar arrogance across American intellectual elite. Trump's election was a true rebellion, directed at anyone perceived to be part of the, quote, establishment. I would agree with that. I think that's pretty factual, actually. The target group included political leaders, bankers, industrialists, academics, Hollywood actors, and, of course, the media. And we all closed our eyes to what we didn't want to see. Okay? The almost universal failure among political pros to predict Trump's victory, the few exceptions, conspicuously, were people who hailed from Rust Belt states like Michael Moore, spoke to an astonishing cultural blindness. Those of us whose job it is to cover campaigns long ago grew accustomed to treating the people as a kind of dumb animal, whose behavior could sometimes be unpredictable, but in the end almost always did what it was told. And I think that's also a very true observation, and I think he's doing that right now, is he's treating us, the people, as a dumb animal by saying we were fooled by Donald Trump, that he's conspiratorial, all of these things, like we didn't understand what we were getting into, and it was this tremendous mistake, instead of, looking at his policies and saying, well, a substantial majority of Americans agreed with those proposals. But this is at least some level of awareness that, yes, the media views us as dumb animals. In the same way, he admits up here they called us racist, sexist, and Russians without any evidence, spuriously. Again, first truth in this article. But interesting, they thought we will almost always do what it is told. So, again, he believes from his position that he has power, that he can control what it is we do. So whenever we, the journalist class, sought insight into the motives and tendencies of this elusive creature, all right, so average Americans are now an elusive creature, our first calls were always to the other eggheads like ourselves. Okay, why is he putting himself down? That's interesting, right? This humility, this is faux humility here. Other eggheads like us, we made a mistake. We talked to pollsters, think takers, academics, former campaign strategists, party spokes, hacks, even other journalists. Day after day, our political talk shows consisted of one geek in a suit interviewing another geek in a suit about the behavior of, okay, here's the common American right here, pipe fitters, store clerks, and cops. All right, all of these are blue-collar jobs. None of them require a college education. And there's plenty of Americans that are electricians. There's plenty of Americans that do construction or whatever they do. And what's wrong with being a pipe fitter? What's wrong with being a store clerk or a cop? And interesting, he picks out in Florida, in Wisconsin, in Ohio, and in West Virginia. So these are the people they failed to understand. It was the illiterate pipe fitters that just got fooled by the simplistic speech patterns of Donald Trump. That's all it was. We were too smart. See, this is a sort of humble brag when he says, we sought insight from other eggheads like ourselves. He's putting himself down, but in a way he's saying, but we're way smarter than those pipe fitters or those plumbers or those electricians or store clerks. He's not actually putting himself or his class down when he does that. So we'd stand over glitzy video maps and discuss demographic data points like we were trying to determine the location of a downed jetliner. Okay? This is just creative writing right here. And the whole time, the people, again, capitalize the people. What about Americans? And the whole time Americans, whose intentions we were wondering so hard about, were all around us, listening to themselves being talked about like some wild, illiterate beast. Well, that was at least insightful. Yeah, we do kind of feel that way, particularly in this article. When 60 Minutes did its election eve story about the mood of the electorate, they had to call up a familiar Beltway figure, pollster Frank Luntz, to put together a focus group. Luntz's purpose was to take the white-hot rage. Well, that white-hot rage and disgust hurled at him by voters on both sides of the aisle during the focus group. So I'm sure there's people that are inarticulate and they express themselves with rage and disgust. But notice what he still hasn't tackled is a single policy issue. Whether it's valid or not, whether it's true or not. We haven't talked about taxes. We haven't talked about immigration. We haven't talked about crime. We haven't talked about drug policy. We're just getting more and more adjectives to discuss a phenomenon that this guy doesn't like. So he took on the white-hot rage and disgust hurled at him by voters. So the voters, this makes him sound like the sympathetic guy, and the voters are, to use his own words, the voters are unhinged. They're just emotional beyond belief, which is another form of ad hominem. They're just attacking the voters, and it is attacking the voters, instead of asking why did the voters want these policies. It was just rage and disgust. So, on both sides of the aisle. Yeah, so this is him pretending to be impartial. It's like using JFK earlier. During a portion, to translate it all into a media speak during the sit-down, Luntz did his job and gave Steve Kroft his soundbite diagnosis of, here we go, the people's temperature. That's not blowing off steam, he said. That is a deep-seated resentment. And I would say that's true. People are pretty resentful of the media. To a degree, I don't think even Taibbi recognizes, even in this mea culpa argument. And then he goes on to write, deep-seated resentment. There was a catchy, succinct line over which we could all collectively stroke our chins in quiet contemplation, more humble brag. That's opposed to what the voters intended, which was to sock us all so hard for our snobism and intellectual myopia that those very chins of ours would get driven straight through the backs of our skulls. So this isn't written for the average American. This is published in Rolling Stone. This is written for these very same snobby, intellectually myopic academics that sit there and stroke their chins. Like this is not for you. And I think it's important to point out it's marketed to you in magazines like Rolling Stone. But he's not. He admits right here he's not writing this for the average American. There was a great deal of talk in this campaign about the inability of the low information voter. Yeah, let's roll that out, because everyone that supported Donald Trump must have simply been. They just were fooled, right? They're just low information. They thought, oh, his hair is funny and he likes to wrestle. I like wrestling. So it is about the inability of the low information voter to understand the rhetoric of the candidates who spoke above a sixth grade language level. All right, so that was the problem. They were just speaking to us like adults, and we just us dumb Americans who the eggheads and the intellectual elite looked down on. We were totally fooled by the playground speech of Donald Trump. It wasn't that he made a case maybe that appealed to us, or he proposed policy that was going to help us. He just spoke to us like we were as dumb as we actually are. We were told by academics, okay, smart people, and analysts, more smart people, that Trump's public addresses rated among the most simplistic political rhetoric ever recorded. So we are the most simplistic voters ever. So you can relax. You're still a smart person out there. It isn't that it's not that your ideas are wrong. It's that you were outnumbered by dumb people. That's what that paragraph says. Okay, so he goes on, but that story cut in both directions. In a way, few of us silver-tongued media types ever thought about. Okay, this is about the sixth or seventh time he's done this self-denigrating, this technique here, and he puts himself down, but what is he actually saying? If they're silver-tongued media types, well, we're just too smart. It's like this ennobling, sad intelligence. We just know so much, and the Trump supporters just know so little. They just fall for the simplistic political rhetoric. So don't feel bad. We didn't lose because we were wrong. We just lost because we knew too much. We were silver-tongued media types. The people, so that's, regular people that voted. And I would say for both parties, just regular people. But this is also a subtle way of insulting Americans. You're not calling them Americans. You're making up kind of this sort of tongue-in-cheek slanderous term. I've never seen anyone call Americans the people, not my fellow Americans, not the American people, but the, quote, capital letters, the people. It's just another way of putting down the people that disagree with you. The people didn't speak our language, okay? Because we were too silver-tongued and they were too simplistic. They didn't speak our language. They don't have our values. They didn't speak our language true, period. But that also meant we didn't speak theirs. So it was just a communication error, really, right? Like, they're so simple and dumb, and we're so smart and intelligent, we didn't even speak the same language. Now here's some beautiful sophistry right here. Beavis and Butthead creator Mike Judge's Idiocracy, ostensibly, okay, so let's throw an SAT word in. Why not? Ostensibly a comedy, but destined now to be remembered as a horror movie. So what he said there is, Idiocracy came true when Donald Trump got elected. And this is kind of an appeal to the stone. Another thing we talked about, dismissing a claim as absurd without demonstrating proof of its absurdity. Just saying it's like Idiocracy without providing one shred of evidence. Still, 3 pages into 5. It's just a horror movie. So it's now going to be remembered as a horror movie. I don't know. I still think it's pretty funny. Was often cited this past year as prophecy. So the Idiocracy has come true, and that goes back up here. The Hillary voters were just too smart. They were too scientific. They were too silver-tongued. And the Trump voters were just simplistic. And you go back to, he opened with the FU phrase. They just swear a lot. Okay, the film described, everybody's seen this movie, but for whatever reason. The film described a future dystopia of idiot Americans, the people, maybe he means the people, idiot Americans physically unable to understand the tepid grammatical speech of a half-smart time traveler from the past. So here's a comparison that Donald Trump is speaking to the dumb people of the future, and Hillary was just too smart for even those idiot Americans to understand. Like, this is an incredibly insulting article. Anybody that thinks that this guy is an intellectual or a good writer. Wow. Many reporters, myself included, found themselves thinking about this film when we heard voters saying they were literally incapable of understanding the words coming out of Hillary Clinton's mouth. Now take notice of this. We've been talking about the silver-tongued and the simplistic Trump voter. So people just couldn't understand what Hillary was saying. America's just become too dumb. And then he cites one person. When Trump talks, I actually understand what he's saying. A young Pennsylvanian named Trent Gower told me at a Trump event a month ago. And then notice this. But like when fricking Hillary Clinton talks, it just sounds like a bunch of BS. So we were incapable of understanding Hillary Clinton, and he cites one young man who off the cuff made a statement that anybody would say. I mean, there's nothing there's nothing unusual about the statement if you're around everyday people. We don't all speak like journalists with our words like tepid grammatical speech. We're not trying to prove that we got an 1100 on our SAT back in the day. But you notice he included this but like, so this is like a Valley Girl thing, but like when fricking. So again, does it have to do with anything Hillary Clinton suggested versus anything Donald Trump suggested? No, it's one of these red herrings, and it's just more of an ad hominem. He's trying to distract the Rolling Stone readers. So really, he's insulting you if you read Rolling Stone, because he's saying, you're so dumb, I can blind you with fancy SAT words, I can stroke your ego, and you're going to agree with me, the elite, because you don't want to get lumped into this group of dumb voters that go, but like when frickin' Hillary Clinton talks, it sounds like a bunch of BS. And of course he throws the swear word in because it makes you sound more ignorant. So, going on. So these Trump voters, you only cited one. You only cited Trent Gower, man. But here we have these Trump voters. So now we're talking about multiple voters off a single anecdotal piece of evidence. I mean, this is clear sophistry. I could find anyone, literally anyone, to say something really dumb about Hillary Clinton that supports her and cite it, but I'm not going to use that as evidence of why she was a bad candidate. I'm going to cite the facts, This guy has a huge platform. Again, why not just provide facts? Anyway, so these Trump voters had a comprehension problem. Well, that's the root of it, isn't it? This is just a fancy way of saying Trump voters were too stupid. They didn't understand Hillary. Trump spoke at a 6th grade level. That's why he won. And then he does more of this, but we just happened to be too smart. But we were just as bad. We couldn't understand what they were saying to us. Why? Because we were too smart. This is just like chicken soup for the failed 2016 liberal soul. We're just too intelligent for it all. It's like we couldn't understand them, they couldn't understand us. But they couldn't understand us because they're dumb. So he goes on, we refuse to accept every signal about whom they hated and how much. Why? Because Trump's voters were speaking a language that has been taboo in America for decades, if not forever. Do you care to give an example? We're speaking a language that has been taboo in America for decades, if not forever. What is a language that has been taboo for decades, if not forever? It can't even be racism, because racism was okay if you go far enough back. Blasphemy? I mean, what do you go back? What language has been taboo in America forever? Like, really look at this sentence and realize it doesn't say anything. There's nothing here. All it is it paints this picture through innuendo. It's this sorrowful outlook of the future. Trump's voters were speaking a language that has been taboo in America. Keep in mind, this cleared multiple editors. Nothing this guy puts out is just written by him in his room. He doesn't just riff it, sitting here in his computer by himself, talking into a microphone. This is heavily reviewed. This is heavily edited. All of this language is carefully vetted and carefully chosen. And he makes a statement like there is a language that has been taboo in America for decades. So that kind of alludes to the racist past, the way Americans used to speak and use slurs, if not forever. Like, it's so tragic, it's worse than the racism of the past because people have never been able to speak this language. What is the language? Again, one example, one fact. Why is this guy regarded as intelligent? So, nobody in this country knows how to talk about class. I do. That's just an absolute lie. Okay? America is like a giant manor estate where the aristocrats don't know they're aristocrats and the peasants imagine themselves undiscovered millionaires. No, it's not. That's also just completely untrue. America is not like a giant manor estate. Now, you want to clarify that all? What's a giant manor estate like? This isn't like a giant manor estate. The aristocrats, okay, those of us that are smart, he's saying, I guess, those of us that are aristocrats don't know we're aristocrats, and the Republicans or the peasants imagine themselves undiscovered millionaires. It's not that you can rise and fall by your own merit in America, because that's one of the results of having freedom. People just imagine themselves undiscovered millionaires. Not as if capitalism hasn't lifted untold numbers of people out of poverty. We just imagine ourselves, if we're not rich yet, we just imagine ourselves undiscovered millionaires. What a tragic scene. Again, it's the tragic Trump voter. You notice that? Everyone that voted for Trump is tragically misguided. We're just the ignorant peasants. I mean, he's literally calling the readers of Rolling Stone, because I imagine most people that buy it like, music. He's literally calling you a peasant. Like, how much money are you going to spend on a magazine to be insulted? And America's cultural elite, trained for so long to think in terms of artificial distinctions like Republicans and Democrats, snore. Everyone uses this rhetoric, instead of more natural divisions like haves and have-nots. America's cultural elite trained to think in terms of artificial distinctions like Republicans and Democrats. So it's an artificial distinction. There's no difference between a conservative and a liberal. Are you kidding me? That's all the difference in the world. Instead of natural divisions like haves and have-nots. Now here he's dog whistling to the socialists, right? It all breaks down along those that have money and don't have money. Conservative and liberal, those are artificial distinctions. Like, really, just look at this. This is just another blatant untruth. And it's right here. And if you're just kind of reading this and you want to be patted on the back for being smart enough to get it, you may not stop and analyze this. But the difference between a Republican and Democrat isn't artificial. It's fundamental. It's absolute. Instead of more natural divisions. What does this mean, more natural? This is like how they sell you granola or how they sell you foods. Oh, it's 100% natural. Your orange juice from concentrate that has 50 grams of sugar in it is more natural. More natural than what, orange soda? This is just a word to make it sound like it's healthy for you. It's more natural. Between haves and have-nots. So the socialist, the Marxist worldview is the natural worldview. Okay, so people refused to believe it until it was too late. It is too late to grasp the meaning of the rage storm headed over the wall. A rage storm. So 50% of the country voting for one of the two major parties is a rage storm. Do you have proof? What's a rage storm? I've never heard this word in my life. Just made up wordsmithing right in front of your face. You can see it a lot with hyphenated words, generally just invented for the emotional impact. Again, no arguments. We're on page 4 almost. Just like the leaders of the Republican Party, who simply never believed its electorate wouldn't drop and roll over on command, so we just dropped and rolled over. Half the country just dropped and rolled over. When the time came. What does that mean? When the time came. The time came for what? Doesn't say. We media types never believed that all that anger out there was real, or at least gathered in enough force to matter. So, if you voted for Trump, you just dropped and rolled over on command, so you're a dog. So Trump voters are now dogs. And when the time came, is this like another oblique Hitler reference, like the final solution? It is now time? Probably is. Most of us smarty pants, okay, those of us that are intelligent, like people that agree with me, again, more humble brag, right? Most of us smarty pants analysts never thought Trump could win because we saw his run, and here's a list of insults, as a half-baked, white supremacist, movement fueled by last gasp, racist frustrations of America's shrinking silent majority. So the silent majority is the enemy, because that's kind of the Reaganite conservative, we don't go out and protest because we have jobs sort of thing. But it's the last gasp. Don't worry, it's dying, it's passé, it's not cool. It's everything that's old and gray and worn out. And it's white supremacist, and it's half-baked. And again, not a single piece of evidence. What is half-baked? And why is his run half-baked? One shred of evidence that says it's half-baked. I mean, the guy talked about it for decades. He went on Oprah and discussed it. It wasn't half-baked. He'd been thinking about it forever. White supremacist, of course, they throw that in. But there's no evidence. What's white supremacist about it? Kanye West is in there giving him a hug. I don't think Kanye West is white supremacist. What makes you think it's the last gasp? And then it's white supremacist and it's racist. Isn't white supremacist racist by definition? So he's not only just insulting the president's supporters, he's run out of insults and he's repeating the same insults over and over. And we're shrinking. See, they're getting weaker. We're winning. We just lost. Okay. Sure, Trump had enough jackbooted nut jobs. Well, there's your Nazi reference. He had enough jackbooted nut jobs and conspiracist stragglers. More insults. It doesn't talk about, maybe they are conspiracy theorists, but were those conspiracies true or were those conspiracies false? Again, he doesn't say because he doesn't have any facts. This is just one creative insult after another. You could do it with a thesaurus. And he ruined the Republican Party. Okay, this is concern trolling. Matt Taibbi doesn't care one bit about the Republican Party being quote-unquote ruined. But surely there was no way he could topple Americans' reigning multicultural consensus. So America has a multicultural consensus. Well, for one, he's saying by Trump winning, the multicultural, which multiculturalism is great, right? Because that means not racist. versus the very racist white supremacists. And it's a consensus. It's a multicultural consensus. Well, is consensus truth? Consensus is not truth. They do this with global warming. There's a 90% consensus. That doesn't mean the science is true or untrue. When Galileo spoke about the Earth being round, that went against the consensus. Consensus is irrelevant to truth. So again, you can see the guy just uses pure sophistry. This is not an intellectual. This guy is not well spoken. It's just a bunch of SAT words strung together. So, after all, the country had already twice voted in an African-American Democrat, well, half, to the White House. Yes, Trump's win was a triumph of the hideous racism, so he never proved there was racism, but now in his conclusion, he's claiming there's racism. So, this is circular logic. His hideous racism, sexism, and xenophobia. Okay, this is the first time we've seen xenophobia, but where has that been discussed? It was a triumph of racism, sexism, and xenophobia, not people that were maybe wanted law and order, control of the borders, bring back jobs, or to make America great again, none of those things. It was a triumph of sexism. How so? That has always run through American society. Oh, the awful 40s. But his coalition also took aim at the neoliberal gentry's, that's cute, pathetic resilience on proxies to communicate with flyover America. They fed on the widespread visceral disdain red staters felt toward the very people Hillary Clinton's campaign enlisted all year to speak on its behalf. Hollywood actors, big-ticket musicians, beltway activists, academics, and media figures. Well, that's a true statement. He definitely, Trump voters do feel animosity towards Hollywood, musicians, activists, and academics. Trump's rebellion was born at the intersection of two toxic American myths, the post-racial society and the classless society. I don't know about you, but I've never heard of the myth of a post-racial society. And I've never heard of the myth of a classless society. And how Trump's rebellion, or his, normal election under normal circumstances that he won resoundingly. The intersection, that's just a fancy word, right? Two toxic. How is it toxic? American myths. Are they myths? And by American, they're immediately qualified as being wrong. The post-racial and the classless society. That's how Trump's rebellion was born. I've never heard of either of these myths. Candidate Trump told a story about a conspiracy. Here we go again, Not whether it's true or false, but just a spooky word. A story about a conspiracy of cultural and financial elites bent on finishing off a vanishing white middle-class nirvana. Wow, we were just scared of this dream world of, having a car and a half and 2.5 kids disappearing. That's what it was. First, by shipping jobs overseas, yes, that happened, and then by waving hordes of crime-prone, bomb-tossing immigrants over the border. That also happened. These elites lived in both parties, Trump warned. What about this was untrue that Trump warned about, by the way? The Republicans were tools of jobs-exporting fat cats, see Mitt Romney, who only pretended to be tough on immigration, absolutely, and trade in order to win votes. Yeah. When all they really cared about were profits. That's true enough. The Democrats were tools of the same interests who subsisted politically on the captured votes of hoodwinked minorities, preaching multiculturalism while practicing globalism. This is kind of a scary level of self-awareness because this is dead on. And and the fact that he's talking about it in derisive terms as if it were untrue. But this may be the most true statement in this entire article. The Democrats were tools of the same interests, so a monoparty, who subsisted politically. The Democrats subsisted politically on the captured votes of hoodwinked minorities, preaching multiculturalism while practicing globalism. Both groups, Trump insisted, were out of touch with the real American voter. So he doesn't address whether this is true or false. He just says neither party saw the awesome potential of this story to upend our political system. Well, is it true or is it not? Why not address that? Why not look at some statistics, look at some facts? No, he just goes on to say Republicans had flirted with racist and sexist. Why is that in parenthetical and sexist? Why not just say and sexist? Republicans had flirted with racist and sexist rhetoric for decades, refusing to the last to understand how dangerous this behavior was. Republicans had flirted with racist rhetoric for decades. I mean, look at this is George Wallace. He was a Democrat that ran for president 3 times. He's famous for enforcing Jim Crow and opposing desegregation. He's the guy that literally stood in the doorway to block little black girls from going to school in integrated schools. I mean, this guy was running for president as late as the 70s. Wallace left office in 79, but won a 4th and final term as governor. This guy was winning governorship elections up until 1982. This is a racist, pro-segregation Democrat. What does he mean? Republicans had flirted with racist and sexist rhetoric. Democrats have flirted with, and they've done more than flirted. They birthed it. Look at the Cruikshank decision and the Colfax massacre. I mean, this was just Democrat operatives outright killing black people. He doesn't talk about that at all for decades. And it's the Republicans refusing to the last to understand how dangerous this behavior was. The Republican Party was the party of the black American. This is just an out-and-out revisionist lie. So they, Republicans, never imagined their voters would one day demand they act on all this race-baiting talk. You mean the way Democrats acted during Jim Crow? The way Democrats opposed desegregation? I mean, that's a matter of historical fact. This is just absolutely rewriting history because you write for the Rolling Stone. They believe their own pablum. Yeah, let's insert a word that's so fancy even Microsoft Word doesn't know it. They believe their own pablum about racism. It means simple ideas. Being a thing of the past and reverse discrimination being the true threat to American polity. Again, appeal to the stone, just dismisses it out of hand without a single fact. Meanwhile, the Democratic leadership, even as it was increasingly indebted to banks and corporations, maybe this is why people were opposed to Hillary Clinton. The Democratic leadership, indebted to banks and corporations, never imagined that it could be the target of a class uprising. How could we be seen as aristocrats? We, of course, so he obviously identifies as an aristocrat. We get union endorsements. Okay. We're the party of FDR. Well, maybe you should read the history of FDR. We're pro-civil rights. No, you're not. You're absolutely not. The Democrats were putting racist politicians in office as late as 1982. You're not pro-civil rights. You're absolutely on the wrong side of history. Okay, let's wrap this up. Trump drove his tens of millions of followers right through each of these major party blind spots. So it's Trump that's blind to history. Maybe you should read history. He called the Republicans bluff on race. So most Republicans aren't racist, but Trump is the real racist. Even though you called John McCain and Mitt Romney racists and Nazis and used all the same rhetoric, that was just kidding, right? Like Bill Maher said, we shouldn't have shot that bullet. We should have saved it because we really wanted to call Trump racist when we called McCain and when we called Romney racist. Well, that was just that was for political convenience, but now it means something. So he fooled the Republicans, and appealed to some sort of authority nonsense with his crazy. Okay, so he called the Republicans bluff on race almost from the start with his crazy Mexican wall idea. I've done a video on this. It's called Appeal to the Stone. Walls don't work. In quotes, because walls do work. It's a crazy wall idea. Well, why is it crazy? He doesn't say why it's crazy. It will work. When you look at Israel, the wall has cut down on suicide bombings. The wall has cut down on crime. The wall has cut down on people breaking in to a tremendous degree. I mean, I've got a whole video with the facts and the statistics all cited there. I can cite the facts, but all he does is call it crazy and then goes from there. That's clearly that's appeal to the stone. You just say it's crazy, and you dismiss the claim as absurd without demonstrating proof for its absurdity. That's just pure relevance fallacy. There's nothing more to that. So why was his crazy wall idea bad? It instantly positioned the rest of the party as nationalist pretenders. Okay. As for the Democrats, he lucked into a race against a politician he would portray as a 30-year-old symbol of Beltway insider consensus. One, he said, left middle America behind. Okay, middle America has been left behind. If you're getting an entry-level job, you're making $10 an hour, and that's what I was making when I started work around the year 2000. Wage inflation has absolutely not happened at all. Way back in February, after following Trump in New Hampshire, I guessed at the probable nominee's general election strategy. So this whole thing, he's done this whole humble brag on how he was wrong along with everybody else. And here he's trying to reestablish his credibility. I guessed it. And what did he guess? Trump will surely argue that the Clintons are the other half of the dissolute conspiracy story he's been selling. Not whether it's true or false. It's just a conspiracy. Representing a workers' party that abandoned workers and turned the presidency into a vast cash-for-access enterprise. Isn't the whole thing with the Clinton Foundation pay to play? I mean, Middle Eastern or, Saudi Arabian kings, they all get that. Okay, avoiding scrutiny, the Clintons, avoiding scrutiny by making Washington into Hollywood East and turning labor leaders and journalists alike into starstruck courtiers. Is that untrue? I mean, that's absolutely true. Back then, I thought Trump had a real chance at the presidency. I thought you've been talking about the whole time how you were blindsided along with everybody else. But here he's got to reestablish his credibility. But later, I made the same mistake most every other reporter did. I listened to polls and media outlets instead of people. I thought Trump's maladroit, okay, another SAT word, and ridiculous general election campaign. Is it ridiculous? Wow, that's kind of just argument to the stone to the T. Dismissing a claim as absurd. Why was it ridiculous? What was ridiculous? What was maladroit about it? And ridiculous general election campaign in which he went, and this is interesting, more concern trolling, right? He went back on virtually every major primary season promise. Did he? He's still trying to build the wall. It seems to me he's trying to keep his promises. he lowered taxes. What major primary season promise has he gone back on? I can't even think of one. But thanks for being concerned. While being revealed through seemingly hourly scandals, not manufactured scandals, not scandals with no credibility, not scandals that have been discredited, not scandals that have been fueled purely by media speculation, but these are legitimate. These conspiracies are legitimate. Through seemingly hourly scandals as one of the world's most corrupt and personally repulsive individuals. I don't find him personally repulsive. I think he's hilarious. I don't find him corrupt. I think he's one of the few people in Washington that isn't corrupt. But again, more ad hominem. He would lose and lose huge, ending up a footnote in history. Liberals love that. Having served no purpose beyond the destruction of the Republican Party. Conventional wisdom said so, and it wasn't conventional wisdom always right. Not quite. We journalists, smart people, made the same mistake the Republicans, dumb people, the same mistake Democrats, smart people, made. We were too sure of our own influence, too lazy to bother hearing things firsthand, and too in love with ourselves to imagine that so many people could hate and distrust us. See, it was hate and distrust. Again, still at the very end of the article, no policy critique whatsoever. Hate and distrust us as much as they apparently do. So he admits he doesn't know. They apparently hate us, or maybe they disagree with us on policy. Maybe it's intelligent. Maybe it's well thought out. Maybe it's well reasoned. Maybe there's a good argument. But why spoil that when you can slander your opponents with sloppy rhetoric? It's too late for any of us to fix this colossal misread and lapse in professional caution. So you still believe that you're in control. Or you were until very recently. Now all we can do is wait to see how much this failure of vision will cost the public. Oh, it's not you that's going to be hurt. Is it the people that you kept referring to? Those people, or is it the peasants? It's going to cost the public, not the well-connected elites. Okay. We supposedly serve. Yeah, that's what this has been, a tremendous service. Just like the politicians, our job was to listen, and we talked instead. Well, that's probably the most true statement in this whole thing. Now America will do its own talking for a while. You know, that's a weird admission, because I thought they were just stupid and they got bamboozled by a wrecking ball and a one-man conspiracy theorist gone wild. The world may never forgive us, Democrats, liberals, journalists, for not seeing this coming. So he's painted this picture, and it's like a mea culpa. It's like we made a mistake. We didn't see this. And the point of the article is what? It's basically to say that we have we're entering a dark time. You know, there's a lot of implied superiority and implied inferiority, like our beliefs are right, their beliefs are wrong. But I just wanted to point out, you know, this guy hasn't provided a single fact or statistic. I mean, we've looked at this whole thing, and it's a bunch of words, and I like to call them, you know, SAT words, because he uses language that's more complex than it needs to be to not to make a case, not to make an argument, not to clarify facts or even present facts. It's just one verbose insult after another. There's no substance to it. This is like eating potato chips for dinner. And so I want to point this out because Matt Taibbi, he for whatever reason, he's really regarded highly. He's really this respected individual. And I guess I would challenge you to go through this article yourself and find one thing that is true. Find one thing that doesn't rely on silly rhetoric. Find a fact and find an argument. Because as I find myself asking again and again and again, if your argument is correct and the facts are on your side, why is it that you simply rely on logical fallacy?